So, ladies and gentlemen, could you please sit down so we can start the press conference? You had a wonderful photo call on the outside, so please sit down so we can start the press conference. Können Sie sich bitte setzen, damit wir mit der Pressekonferenz...
so that we can start with the press conference.
Please sit down, everybody sit down please, so we can start the press conference. Dankeschön, setzen Sie sich bitte.
Please sit down.
Setzen Sie sich bitte.
Stop
filming please. Please sit down and please, during the press conference, don't use the flash. Bitte kein Blitzlicht während der...
Please don't use the flash during the press conference.
Sit down, please. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the press conference on the 666 International Film Festival screening competition Genius, and please have a welcome for the producer James Bierman. Wonderful to have her here again last year with Mr. Holmes. Now she's back again. Have a welcome for Laura Linney playing Louis Saunders. Nothing much to say. Please have a welcome playing Thomas Wolfe, Jude Law. It's a great pleasure to have him here for his directorial debut. Please have a welcome for the director, Michael Grandage. And the one who wrote with him, produced with him, and please have a welcome for John Logan. Playing the part of Max Perkins. Please have a welcome, Colin Firth. And next to me, please have a welcome playing F. Scott Fitzgerald, Guy Pearce. Michael, start giving you the first question on your first press conference, as you told me before.
Yes, it is.
In the beginning of the movie, we have this wonderful scene when the daughter of Max says, "I don't like movies, I like books." What bring you from the stage to the screen? Give us a shortcut.
The short answer that brought me from the stage to the screen is that I've been looking for many years for a film to direct, and when this screenplay came to me from John Logan, I was very clear that it offered something that I was looking for in many ways. The most obvious, apart from the beautiful narrative and the story that I would be able to tell, was also the confidence that at the centre of it were these extraordinary parts for actors. And having never done a film before, the one thing you look for is at least one area you might be able to bring something from your previous job into the new job. And my relationship with actors is the thing I perhaps cherish most. And so an opportunity to do a film where the relationship about building character with actors was at the centre of the film was something that I was hoping to find, and found it.
As this press conference is extremely packed, please just go for one question. On the right side, there's the first, please.
Hello, my name is Anne-Christine. I'm from Canada. Great casting, by the way. You believe in every character. My question is for the writer. You bring us through the grueling work of making a book, but on what did you base it?
It was, the movie is based on a magnificent biography called Max Perkins, Editor of Genius, which was written by my friend Scott Berg, who's with us today, that won the National Book Award, which I read 30 years ago. And it just stayed with me. So 16 years ago, I got in touch with Scott. I began a series of dinners where I tried to convince him to sell me the rights. And I found the story compelling. I found it personal about what it is to be a writer, what it is to be an artist. And I bought the rights, and for the past 15 years, I've been developing it. And for me, it really achieved critical mass with Michael Grandage, because Michael and I had done 2 plays together in London, and I knew I had a collaborator who cared as much as I did. And so that's how it all came together.
Okay. Your question here in front, on the left, please.
Alaudin Hamide from Clan Kosovo. Congratulations on the movie. Do you think that people now will read books of Tom differently now when they will see a movie?
Well, I certainly hope so. And one of my fondest wishes is that some people will see the movie and be fascinated enough to pick up Look Homeward Angel, because I think, as Jude would attest, it's a uniquely challenging but uniquely rewarding piece of work and a magnificent American novel. And Woolf is on the verge of being forgotten. So if we remind a few people that there's a great writer to be discovered, then that's an extra bonus for our movie.
Okay, your question somewhere, I guess. Thank you.
Hello, this is Laura Sanchez from W Radio, Colombia. My question is for Mr. Colin Firth and Mr. Jude Law. First of all, congratulations for your role. It's been a great job for you guys. My question is, what has it been the most challenging thing about playing these two geniuses, Max Perkins and Tom Wolfe? Thank you so much.
It's hard to single something out. I think one of the things that I found unusual, it won't have gone unnoticed, that it's not the first time I've played a rather restrained man in a suit. But taking a character like that and pitting him against someone whose energy is so completely contrary to that was a very interesting challenge for all of us, and I think for Michael as well. My instinct was to take him even further into a taciturn, repressed silence, which is very much how he was observed to be. I thought people talked about Maxwell Perkins as being barely audible at times, and that's how I started it when we rehearsed it. But of course Jude, who's jumping off the walls and swinging from the chandeliers, and then there still has to be a scene. So, it was about actually making that energy work where it's completely one conflicting with the other, but still works as a dynamic. So I think trying to adjust to each other's completely different energy was quite challenging.
Yeah. Similarly for me, though in memory, I think one of the biggest challenges was also really celebrating and therefore bringing to life the speed of thought with which these two great men conversed. And it was clear from our wonderful script that the rhythm and the music that was to be found between these two men was very much at the heart of making their intellectual abilities clear. And Michael was very adamant from the beginning that he wanted a staccato, almost rat-a-tat between us. So I remember endlessly rehearsing before scenes to try and get the speed of their responses as quickly as possible. So the challenge of finding that music to me was something that stands out.
Okay, here's a question, please. Would you stand up?
Rodrigo Fonseca from Brazil. Question to Jude and Mr. Colin Firth. This movie celebrates a really powerful period for literature. I would like to hear about you too, if you made any specific research on the literature of 1920s, and how did this movie change your relation with literature?
Well, the vast majority of research, for want of a better word, that I did really was just to read Thomas Wolfe's work, and unfortunately for me, the vast majority of his work was autobiographical or seemingly so, and so there was a huge amount for me to mine. Although having said that, as I endeavoured to wade my way through all of Tom Wolfe's work, I realised that, of course, it had already been. It was a path very well trodden, and Mr. Berg had been there, Mr. Logan had been there, and it was all really in the script. That said, it was well worth my while reading back over certainly his novels and his letters. I think the thing that struck me most, and I'll be specific. I'll talk specifically about Thomas Wolfe because obviously I have opinions of that movement, that era of writers, some of whom are in the film. But specifically about Tom, what impressed me the most was his desire to shake things up, was his desire to try and find a new voice, to leave the past as the past, and to push himself in a new direction. And he clearly had incredible writing skills, but it was almost as if that wasn't enough. He wanted to let them flow from truth and his heart, and fighting to find honesty at all costs was, I always found, incredibly admirable.
It's I have to say, in the time we had, if you wanted to research by reading, you could have spent all of that time reading Thomas Wolfe, because the quantity was so vast. The Maxwell Perkins was at pains to point out later in his life that nothing of Thomas Wolfe's work was lost. He didn't excise it and then put it in the bin. He wasn't interested in doing that. It went into short stories and it went into subsequent novels, some of which were posthumous. So it's all there to be read, and the volume in a fairly short life is immense. And I tried my best to go through as much of that as I could, and that was a discovery. I'd never read a word of Thomas Wolfe, so that was very rewarding. And then reading some of his more luminous names that I rediscovered. I think I'd misjudged Scott Fitzgerald as a young man. I think I made the mistake that a lot of his contemporaries made in thinking that he was writing very beautifully about the party scene, about ambitions for wealth and status. And that Perkins was astute enough to realize that that was a misjudgment, that he was in a paradoxical position, that he was famous because he was misjudged as that, but he was also underestimated for that actually he was writing about something much more profound, about the poverty of the spirit and the disillusionment. I fell in love with Fitzgerald again this time, and being partly in love with Guy Pearce, that
Only partly.
yeah. That helped with that. I read pretty well all of Hemingway, which I hadn't read as much. My reading of Hemingway was very incomplete. But then also writers that I hadn't discovered that Perkins had represented, like Hamilton Basso and J.P. Marquand and Ring Lardner, Marjorie Kinnan Rawlings. They're all real gems to rediscover, I think. So I think that Perkins is an incredible starting point for discovering American literature of that period.
There's a question in the middle, please. Yeah.
This is a question for Mr. Colin Firth. Hello, I'm Nicola Romeliotis from Italy. This is a biopic, but it's a very strange biopic because you make the character is an editor and is not a character in the front line, because the biopics usually is characters in the front line, is writers, directors, actors. It was hard to make research for the character you make.
That aspect of him is probably what fascinated me the most. I think that someone who is heroic in a way that is not dependent on being in the front line, that is the facilitator of others' talent, that those who are in the front line, and without whom I don't think they would have achieved what they achieved, was fascinating to me. And also someone whose eye and his ear was so finely tuned, and whose judgment and his integrity was so intact, and yet who did not want any credit whatsoever, whose instinct was to remain invisible, particularly in an era when we are all clamoring to be visible. We're perhaps it's always been thus, but we now have the tools to broadcast ourselves, and we obsessively do so. We're sitting up here being photographed, and people take selfies. There's the Facebook profiles and Instagram, and there's a kind of rampant exhibitionism, which may have been in us, and I'm an actor, so I know what I'm talking about. But we now have instruments with which to do that, and there's a kind of frenzy to do so. And I think that Perkins is thrown into relief against that background. If you look at a man who His spirit was hugely adventurous, and this is why he was attracted to the adventurers, why he read War and Peace over and over again, why he was attracted to Hemingway and Fitzgerald and Woolf, and wanted to basically harness and enable those kinds of passions.
I would like to invite Laura to give us a little idea on that. And preparing for your part of Louis, did you read the letters by Max Perkins? He did on his daughters and to Elizabeth Lemon, and also how you invented your character in part in opposite to him.
We all had the great resource of Scott's book, so there was a great deal that was there, and then there are books that there's a book of Maxwell Perkins' letters to his daughters during the summers when they were separated, which is really heartwarming. And then they're just the universal dynamics that the women in this movie represent that I think are very relatable, and things are very accurate to the period of the time and also now. You have two women in this film, one who has a wonderful home life but is not able to fulfill her artistic aspirations, and then you have a woman who has a wonderful creative life but doesn't have the home life that she craves or the stability of love that she craves. So you have these two women who each has what the other wants. So at least from the female dynamic of this movie, there's that sort of goes into the equation of the two men as well. So it was wonderful to work with everybody here at this table, and it was great fun.
Okay, your question here, please. Yes.
Okay. Hello, my name is Shumi. I'm from Austria Uncut. My question is for all the actors. When you play a character that existed in real life, how much freedom as an actor do you have to bring your own personal touch into the character? Thank you.
You're the most famous character.
Well, it's a difficult question to answer because you obviously go through a process of, as the boys have talked about, researching and looking at the historical facts about this particular person. But at a certain point, you need to try and understand the personality that you're actually going to portray on screen. And so, I suppose to some degree. But in the same way, when you're playing a character that hasn't existed before, you just need to find the reality and the honesty of that of that personality and that psychology. And the idea of finding your freedom to sort of inject your own personality into it. I mean, it's such an elusive and strange thing, acting for me. I'm doing the best I possibly can to leave myself at home when I'm playing a character. So I'm happy not to have any of that freedom, to be honest. I quite like the structure of a character that's well formed on the page, whether it was a real person or not. So I think as a writer, perhaps you're looking for more freedom to express a character. But for me personally, as an actor, I like the boundaries that are set by writers, actually.
Next question.
Hi, my name is...
No, I'm just... Yes, what he said.
Hi, my name is Frauke Gust, in the back, Radio Berlin. It's a question for Jude Law here. Mr. Law, how much do you had to suffer for this, doing this American dialect accent in your performance? How much of a suffer was that? And
not as much as we had to suffer.
Yeah. And a question for Mr. Firth, continuing then, what's your favorite book and what's your favorite movie? That would be nice to know. But first, Mr. Law, please. How much did you have to suffer for that accent?
I'm afraid I didn't have to suffer greatly. I'm not sure whether that's what you want to hear or not. I think every actor has a different process when you have to assume an accent. Mine starts with listening to recordings of people from the same area as the accent of the accent that you're trying to assume, mimic, and then that slowly moves on to the page and the text that you have, and looking at that phonetically. And I found this one actually I wouldn't say easy, but I found it easier than others. It's got an. I've just remembered something. Laura's family is from the same area.
Yeah, I was just going to speak up.
Yeah, that Tom came from. So I also had a dialect coach and Laura, so I had an extra pair of ears on set, reminding me of certain vowel sounds and word endings.
And actually, Jude's underestimating what he was able to do with that movie. This is not just a Southern accent, and like any country, there's a great a difference, a range of Southern accents, and this accent is a Southern accent with a hint of Appalachia in it, which is very specific and not easy to put your mouth around if you're not accustomed to it. And then also what I loved hearing, what I loved being on set was also hearing him speak, because the rhythm felt very familial to me. So he's completely underestimating the skill involved there.
I don't really have a but all right, my favorite movie is Genius, and my favorite book is Maxwell Perkins, editor of Genius.
So please move your heads to the left. It's your question, please.
Hello, this is for whoever may wish to answer it, but I was interested to know that in working through this story, how did your sort of understanding of genius, perhaps it changed? Because stereotype is often that collaboration compromises it, whereas I would say that this makes an argument to say that it flourishes under collaboration.
Also, the nature of what is genius comes up in the film. I mean, there's a line in the film that Max has the genius for friendship. And I think it's an important line for me, that, because I think when we usually try, first of all, as we all know, it's an overused word, but also it's a word that quite frequently when people are asked to explain it, they come up with Mozart and Einstein and Shakespeare, and actually to have a genius for friendship means that a lot of people can have a genius for something. And I think that's quite important. And so the word took on new meanings, lots of new meanings with this film, for all of us, I think. And the capacity for genius was certainly one of them. I don't know if anybody else wants to add anything to that.
No, I think that's good. I mean, to me, it's always felt like one of those abstract nouns that's up for debate. You know, people are tempted to capitalize the first letter, but it's a word like, art or beauty or something, and you can argue over it. And people use it as an evaluation on something. People might have been debating whether David Bowie was a genius in 1975, and now he's gone. I think you feel like the story is written, and I don't think anyone would argue about it. It's so I think it has, as Michael says, quite a nebulous usage, really.
There's also a nice reminder of the word that it does exist, and that it's worth seeking out and worth appreciating in a world now where everything sort of is given equal weight. It's nice to be reminded that things are not of equal weight, that there is true genius, there is a standard that people can go beyond, there is an evolution that happens within art, within humanity, and that's a nice reminder. I find it an inspiring reminder.
Okay, question on the right in the back.
Hi, I'm Lida Bach, I'm freelancer. My question goes out to the director and Mr. Logan as well. In the movie, there are a lot of great books mentioned. We hear Ernest Hemingway and Fitzgerald, and we also see their books on the shelf in Perkins' office. You just mentioned Marjorie Kinnan Rowling's, also Edith Wharton and other great female writers were edited by Mr. Perkins, and we neither hear their names, we don't see their names in form of books or a newspaper headline. Why did you make this decision?
Did you see Marjorie Kinnan Rowling's book on the shelf?
Okay, so I missed it, but he
didn't edit Edith Wharton, sorry. The Scribners did, but Perkins did not.
Okay, so, but we can say that apart from this one maybe little bit where we see her name, there's no mentioning, not even, where we heard the man's name several times. Yes. Again and again, we also see them. Why did you make that decision to keep the female writers out? I mean, they are important, Edith Wharton.
No, it certainly wasn't a decision to somehow treat female writers of the period in any way with disregard or disrespect. This is a very particular story about Max Perkins' relationship with Thomas Wolfe and the other writers in his circle. And one of the themes is Max Perkins had a lot of daughters and no sons. And his wife, Louise, frequently referred to Maxwell's clients as his boys. These are the sons he never had. So it's a very particular trope that we're exploring. And the reality, sadly, of 1929 is if you look at what was published, the publishing list, you will not see a lot of women writers. Thankfully, that has changed. And we have representation of sexes and colors and creeds and ways of thinking that weren't being published, at the time. But what we created in Max's office and in the dialogue between these men was to serve a very particular story, which for me is always a story of a father and his son.
Okay, on the other side, please. Yeah. No, then here. Yes, wait for the microphone. It's over there.
Me?
Yeah, there's a microphone.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah.
Hagop Edrosi on LA Weekly. I was particularly interested, overall scene, I'm a literature major.
Please try to speak in the microphone.
The writing of Woolf was my favorite writer, and also Fitzgerald. I was particularly interested in the scene, I guess my question is for Mr. Logan, between Fitzgerald, when Guy visits, when the hero, the two heroes, when the scenes between Fitzgerald and Woolf, which were, I'm just curious, did they actually meet in reality, or was that just written?
No, they did actually meet. When Thomas Wolfe left Scribner's and left Max Perkins, he took what he called a rambling tour of the West, and that's when Scott Fitzgerald was in Hollywood writing screenplays, and he sought him out as someone to talk to, and they discussed the very themes that they discuss in the movie, which is legacy and how we feel about those who around us, and Scott challenged him on his relationship with Max Perkins. It's in Scott Berg's biography. Yeah, it is.
Okay. Question in the middle, please.
Hi, I'm from Hungary, and the question is for Guy Pearce. You played in Australian films, American independent movies, studio films, big Hollywood blockbusters, and British films. So I would like to ask you, which one do you prefer among those things, or you just don't think on these terms? Thank you.
Which kind of films you prefer?
Which do you prefer, or do you not think in those terms?
Oh yeah, I mean, I don't really have a preference. I think I just, as a script comes along and I read it, and if it's a character that I feel like I can connect to on some level, and if it's a story that feels somewhat original and actually resonates, and if it's there also then a director that I can relate to and we have a decent connection, then all of those things on different sorts of levels usually inspire me to say yes or no to a film. So whether it's a bigger American thing or a smaller Australian film or whatever it happens to be, I tend not to take a lot of notice of that, to be honest. It's much more about, as I say, the sort of the creative process of what I respond to on an emotional level, really. Yeah.
Okay, your question, please.
Yeah, congratulations, a terrific film, and the performances are all magnificent. However, I'm very, very, very curious and appreciative of the editorial process that you reveal in it, and I think most people, even readers, don't appreciate what the editor really does. My mother was a book editor, novel editor, and I always saw her scribbling, but really didn't get quite the insight that you guys did. And so, for Michael, did you have access to the manuscripts that were actually edited? I mean, was there a chance to really get into the authenticity of his process?
There was a lot of, I mean, the good news is there was a lot of stuff available to us, even though it was some time ago. And certainly we were able to, and indeed the design team had a great, wonderfully recreating, especially for some of the shots, the editing process going on. We got an editor in at one point to actually show Colin the speed with which some of it happens. It was a fascinating insight for us as well, because I think probably we knew as little of the editing process as anybody else does, and so learning about it and then being able to make a piece of work that shows it happening with such passion might make people, I mean, I would love it if people I see regularly sitting reading novels. I mean, it's right and proper that they just read the novel and they assess the novel they've written, but if there's even a slight moment now where they might consider the process that's gone into it, I think that's a very welcome thing from the things we've discovered, certainly.
And it's also important, I think, for me to observe that Perkins was not a proofreader. You know, he wasn't sitting there correcting grammar. He was very, very resistant to internal editing of sentences, for instance. He wanted to preserve the integrity of Woolf's sentence structure and his expression and his syntax. He didn't want to alter the nature of it. He would, you know, in order to get the book between two covers, as he put it, he just needed to take out chunks, and he found it was much more, it would honor the integrity of the original much more to take out an entire chunk and maybe dedicate it to a short story or put it somewhere else than to actually change the way, the nature of the voice. And in fact, he was a notoriously awful proofreader, I think. Perkins was not particularly good at finding the spelling mistakes or you know, that was someone else's job. And in fact, I think one of Woolf's beefs was one of his books came out full of errors because it came out so abruptly and then, you know, had to be looked at again. So I think that the editing process must never be confused with that rather anal act of manual labor of just, you know, cleaning up the text. And it's a much more creative process than that.
Okay. Last two questions, please. One there, over there on the right side, please.
Okay. My name is Diana Zinkler, and I'm working here for Funke Zentralredaktion from Berlin, and I have a question for Colin Firth. You mentioned it before that it's not your first character, a man wearing a suit, being a bit restrained. What's your fascination about this kind of role, and does it have something to do with yourself?
The suit is the costume, I put it on. If someone wants me to wear a mankini in a film, I'm available. You know, anybody wants to free me from restraint? I'm all up. Yeah, no, I'm ready to burst out of a cake.
And it wasn't tough to wear a hat all the time.
No, the hat became a part of me, almost literally, and you know, it was a joy. I think the hat became my character in many ways. Listen. Having said that, you'd be surprised how much variation I think I can find within the confines of a suit. You know, yes, internal characters, but I find repression really interesting because I think there's an awful lot going on inside there, and I think mystery is fascinating in all art forms. Everything, you know, the more we're left to guess at, the more that's left out, the more that's left unexpressed. I also find communication most interesting in its difficulties. I think that people write poetry and books precisely because it's difficult. You find oblique ways of doing things, you find obscure ways of doing things, you find ways to try to clarify things. And I think as an actor, when there's a certain amount of reserve, it's an analog to that. And, you know, I think the best writing is, and that applies to this script, is not where people are saying precisely what it is that needs to be said. You get the message about what these characters need to say, you know, through oblique means at times. You know, people can be talking about apparently trivial things. Often the worst writing is when it's right bang on the nose. I love you, don't leave me, that's the worst thing. Because actually human beings don't really find the right thing at the right time to say. Anyway, so that's, you know, it is my fascination with that led me to be such a consistent wearer of suits.
Okay, the final question here on the left. Please.
Hello, Henry Barnes from The Guardian here. Hello.
Hello.
I'll stand up. I was going to ask a question, but I might just pitch you a Mankini film instead, Colin. The question is, has anyone ever edited your art in a way that's upset you? And secondly, does it get more difficult to edit artists as they get more successful?
Is this me? You're asking?
Anybody?
You go.
Well, yes, I have been edited. You know, it's every script you write gets changed in the process. But to me, you know, when the genius of genius is a binary act, it is Max Perkins and Thomas Wolfe together create something. And, you know, I'm a dramatist. I don't write prose, I don't write novels or poems, and I exist to collaborate. And my work is most exciting to me when I'm sitting with Michael Grandage talking about our new play. Or I'm sitting with Ridley Scott saying, all right, we're doing an Alien movie, how are we going to do it? You know, we're going to figure these things out. So things change, I lose things that are valuable to me, but there's abundant recompense in that, as there was for Thomas Wolfe. You know, he was incredibly proud of Look Homeward Angel. He knows it's a better book than what he delivered, and he grew because of his relationship with another artist, and that's how I've always felt. I've always tried to make my way through life as well.
And I got a sense of how hard, to answer the other part of your question, I get a sense of how hard editing is for Wolfe, if you like, because in the actual edit of the film, one of the parts of that process quite often is to get rid of stuff you've already fallen in love with. And that is a very difficult thing to do. And I think the edit, in that respect, gave me new insight into the subject of the film. Fascinating.
Michael, at the end of your first movie press conference, presenting your first movie here in Berlin, would you say you've been addicted to this crazy movie business?
I get addicted to this? I could. It's been delightful, and you've all been wonderful. Thank you very much.
It's delightful to have you all here in Berlin presenting the Genius here in competitions. Thanks for being here, and have a wonderful time at the Berlinale.